Hello, my dear. Come, sit with me for a spell. It's a bit drizzly out today. One of those soft gray mornings that's just perfect for a good cup of tea and a bit of a wander down memory lane. I was just reaching for a biscuit, from that old tin my Arthur gave me. Oh, must be 60 years ago now. It's funny, isn't it, how some things stay with you. The tin is a bit dented now. The painted roses are faded, much like myself, I suppose. But it still holds the best SHORTBREAD. As my fingers were rummaging around inside, they brushed against something cold. Something small and metallic that certainly wasn't a biscuit. She pauses, her smile fading slightly into a more thoughtful, distant expression. I'd nearly forgotten it was in there. I keep it tucked away at the bottom, under the waxed paper. Silly, really. It's not a secret, not anymore. But some memories you keep in a special place. Even if that place is just an old biscuit tin. Her hands, wrinkled and marked with the fine map of a long life, reappear on the table. She gently places a small, tarnished silver locket in the center of the frame. It's heart-shaped and dented on one side. This old thing, it doesn't look like much, does it? But, oh dear, this little piece of silver holds the weight of a life I never lived. It holds the story of a promise I had to break, and a truth that took me 50 years to finally understand. It all started back in 1958. I was 17, and in our village, 17 wasn't the carefree age it is today. It was the age you were expected to know your path, to settle your future. We lived on a farm, my family did. Not a big one, mind you. Just enough to keep us fed and a little left over to sell at the market. My father was a good man, but stern. He was carved from the same hard earth he worked every day. He believed in 3 things: hard work, family loyalty, and the silent grudge he held against the Vincents. The Vincents owned the farm next to ours. Our fields were separated by nothing more than a rickety stone wall and about a generation's worth of bad blood, some old dispute over a property line, long before I was born. My father never spoke of it directly. It was just a cold, hard fact of our lives. We did not associate with the Vincents. We did not acknowledge them at the market. We did not, under any circumstances, trust them. But the heart of a 17-year-old girl, you see, doesn't much care for property lines or ancient grudges, especially when the Vincents' youngest son, Elias, had eyes the color of the summer sky and a smile that could coax the blossom out on the coldest spring day. He wasn't loud or boastful like the other boys. He was quiet, thoughtful. He noticed things. He noticed the way I'd tie my hair with a blue ribbon, and the next day, a single, perfect bluebell would be waiting for me in a nook of that old stone wall. Our meetings were always there, at the wall. Stolen moments at dusk when the sky was bruised purple and pink, when my father was cleaning his tools and his mother was calling him in for supper. We'd talk for what felt like minutes, but it would be hours. We talked about everything and nothing. His dream of being an architect in the city, my foolish hope of being a writer. We were just children, really, building a world for ourselves in the shadow of our parents' war. He gave me this locket one evening. The air was thick with the smell of rain and damp earth. He'd saved up for weeks to buy it from a traveling merchant. She gently touches the dent. This dent that happened the night he gave it to me. I was rushing home, terrified of my father finding out, and I tripped near the old well. I tucked the locket into my dress to hide it, and I fell right on it. I remember thinking, even then, that it felt right, that our love was bound to be a bit bruised and imperfect. Inside, she fumbles with the clasp for a moment, her old fingers struggling slightly before it pops open. Inside, there's a picture of him, just a tiny one from the village fair, and behind it, pressed so thin it's almost transparent, is one of his bluebells. He placed it in my palm that night, his hand warm and steady over mine. His sky-blue eyes were so serious, so full of a hope that frightened me more than my father's anger. "I promise, Eleanor," he whispered, and his voice was barely louder than the rustling leaves. "I promise I'll find a way for us. I promise." It sounded so beautiful then, a promise of a future, of a life away from the silence and the struggle. But standing there in the twilight, with the cold silver growing warm in my hand, I knew that, to my father, that beautiful promise would be nothing but a bitter betrayal, and I had no idea that a terrible drought was on its way. A drought that would parch the earth and force my father's hand turning my life of stolen moments into a nightmare of impossible choices. The weight of that promise, dear, was only just beginning to settle. That summer was a season of secrets. Every day was a tightrope walk. At home, I was Eleanor, the dutiful daughter, helping my mother mend sheets, feeding the chickens, never speaking out of turn. But in my heart, I was living by the stone wall. Every chore I did was a countdown to dusk. Every glance from my father felt like an accusation, sending a jolt of fear through me. Did he know? Could he see it on my face? The locket stayed hidden, tucked away in my sewing box beneath spools of thread. Sometimes, in the dead of night, I'd take it out and hold it, the metal cool against my skin. It was my only tangible proof that Elias was real, that our whispered dreams weren't just fantasies I'd cooked up to escape the dreary routine of farm life. Elias was clever. He'd leave me notes in the hollow of an old oak, tucked into a copy of a book he'd borrowed from me from the mobile library. He wrote about the buildings he wanted to design, great glass towers that touched the clouds, and I'd write back, on scraps of paper, about the stories I wanted to tell. We were creating a life on paper, a fragile blueprint for a future that felt increasingly out of reach. The drought began not with a bang, but with a slow, creeping dread. The sky turned a pale, unforgiving white for weeks on end. The earth in our fields, usually dark and rich, grew cracked and dusty. The corn stalks were stunted and yellow. My father would come in from the fields late, his face etched with a deep worry that made him even quieter, more severe. The air in our little house grew thick with unspoken anxiety. The price of feed went up. The well grew lower. One market day, the tension between our families finally boiled over. It wasn't a shouting match, nothing so dramatic. It was colder than that. My mother and I were at our stall, trying to sell the few vegetables we'd managed to grow. Mr. Vincent father, walked past. He was a proud man, but the drought was hitting him just as hard. He gave a short, stiff nod in our direction. A simple courtesy. My father, who was loading a crate nearby, saw it. He stopped what he was doing and just stared at Mr. Vincent, his jaw set like granite. He didn't return the nod. He just turned his back, a deliberate, brutal dismissal. I saw the flash of hurt and anger in Mr. Vincent's eyes before he hurried away. I felt my face burn with shame. That evening, the storm broke, but not in the sky. My father sat at the head of the dinner table, pushing his food around his plate. The Hendersons' well is still drawing deep, he said, to no one in particular. They have the land that borders the creek. They're good people, salt of the earth. My heart went cold. I knew the Henderson family. Their farm was 5 miles to the east. And I knew their son Arthur. He was a few years older than me, a kind, shy man with big, capable hands and a quiet smile. He was reliable. He was steady. He was everything Elias, with his dreams of glass towers, was not. James Henderson and I were talking, my father continued, his voice low and heavy, talking about the future, about combining lands, about ensuring our family name doesn't turn to dust with this farm. He finally looked at me, and his eyes weren't angry. They were desperate. It was so much worse than anger. It was the look of a man trapped, trying to chew his way out. Arthur is a good man, Eleanor, he said. His meaning is clear as a church bell on a Sunday morning. A good, steady man. He didn't need to say more. An alliance, a marriage. It was a business transaction, a way to save our family, to save his pride. I felt the locket, hidden in my room, suddenly grow heavy, as if it were turning to lead. Each whispered promise from Elias now felt like a stone pulling me under. I was being offered a choice that was no choice at all. My family's survival, or a love that was beginning to feel like a beautiful, impossible dream. Later that week, hidden in the old oak, I found a frantic note from Elias. He knew. News travels fast in a small village, and his words sent a new wave of panic through me, because he had a plan. A wild, terrifying plan. Elias's plan was simple, reckless, and born of pure desperation. Meet me, his note said. The pencil strokes, urgent and messy. The city train. It leaves at 7 o'clock, Saturday morning. I have a little money saved, enough to get us started. It's our only chance, Eleanor. It's now or never. The city, it was a world away. I'd only been there once, on a school trip. It was a loud, overwhelming place of smoke and noise and people who never looked you in the eye. To go there with nothing but $17 and a boy with a dream, it was madness. It was terrifying. And for a fleeting, wild moment, It was the most wonderful thought in the world. The days leading up to that Saturday were a blur of inner turmoil. Arthur Henderson began to visit. He'd come by on a Sunday afternoon, his hat in his hands, his face scrubbed clean. He'd sit awkwardly in our parlor, talking to my father about crop rotation and the weather. He was polite and kind to me, asking about my books, but his shyness made conversation difficult. He was a good man. I knew he was. Looking at him, I could see my entire life laid out before me, a safe, predictable path of harvests and seasons, of children and community, a life where I would never be hungry, but my heart might starve. It was all so overwhelming. Sometimes I wonder what you would have done, dear, when your heart is pulling you one way, and your duty, your family, is pulling you another. It feels like you're being torn in two. By the way, dear, where are you watching from? What time is it there? I'd love to hear from you in the comments below. It's a comfort, sharing these old stories and knowing someone is listening. The night before Ilias's deadline, I knew I had to see him one last time. I slipped out of the house, my heart pounding a frantic rhythm against my ribs. We met at the stone wall. The moon was a sharp sliver in the sky, and it cast long, dancing shadows. Elias looked thin, worried. The easy smile was gone, replaced by a fierce intensity. "You got my note," he said, his voice a low whisper. "Elias, we can't," I breathed, the words tasting like a lie even as I said them. "It's foolish. We have nothing. We have each other," he insisted, taking my hands. His were cold. "Isn't that enough? I'd rather starve with you in the city than watch you marry him, Eleanor. I'd rather try and fail than live a life wondering what if." He was right, of course. The what-ifs were already haunting me, but I saw my mother's tired face, my father's defeated slump. How could I add to their burden? How could I be the cause of their ruin? We didn't see my father approach. He moved quietly for such a big man. One moment we were alone, and the next, he was there, a dark shape detaching itself from the shadow of the well. "Get inside, Eleanor," he said, and his voice was a low, dangerous rumble. It was the voice he used when a fox was near the chickens. Elias stood his ground. "Sir, I love your daughter. You know nothing of love," my father spat. "You know only what your family has taught you, to take what isn't yours." He took a step closer, and for the first time, I saw real hatred in his eyes. "They betrayed my father. They tried to ruin us then, and you will not ruin us now." He grabbed my arm, his grip like iron. "You are forbidden from seeing him. Do you understand me? Forbidden." He dragged me back to the house, leaving Elias standing alone by the wall. The door slammed shut, and the finality of it echoed in the silent kitchen. My father locked the door, something he never did. He looked at me, his chest heaving. "The Hendersons are our future. That boy is our past. You will not destroy this family." He didn't shout. It was worse than shouting. It was a verdict. My choice had been taken from me. But as I lay in my bed that night, staring at the ceiling, I knew there was still one choice left: the 7 a.m. train. It wasn't just a train to the city anymore. It was a train to another life, a life of my own making. And the only question left was whether I had the courage, or the selfishness, to get on it. My father had locked the door, but he hadn't locked my window. That night was the longest of my life. Sleep was an impossible dream. I lay in my small bed, the thin mattress doing little to comfort me, and listened to the house settle. Each creak of the floorboards, each groan of the timber, sounded like a judgment. The grandfather clock in the hall downstairs ticked with the slow, deliberate rhythm of a hangman's march. Tick-tock. Another second of my old life gone. Another second closer to a decision that would change everything. I slipped out of bed, the floorboards cold beneath my bare feet. The moonlight, that same sliver from the sky, painted a pale, ghostly rectangle on the floor. I stood in that patch of light and felt like a ghost myself, caught between two worlds, belonging to neither. My mind was a battlefield. I saw Ilias's face, alight with desperate hope. I imagined the small, cramped apartment in the city, the thrill of anonymity, the struggle, but the shared struggle. I imagined holding his hand and facing the world together. The thought was a spark of warmth in the cold room. Then, my mind would betray me. I saw my mother, her hands raw from lye soap and hard work, her face a mask of quiet resignation. I saw my father, his pride shattered, his shoulders slumped in defeat, telling his friends at the market that his only daughter had run off, shamed the family name. I imagined Arthur Henderson's kind, confused face, a good man who deserved better than to be a pawn in my story. The guilt was a physical thing, a heavy stone in my stomach. I crept to my little wooden desk. By the faint moonlight, I pulled out 2 sheets of paper. My hands were trembling so badly, the first few words were just a jagged scrawl. I wrote 2 letters. The first was to my parents. Dear Mama and Papa, I wrote, please forgive me. I know you won't understand, but my heart is leading me somewhere else. I cannot live a life chosen for me. I have to go and make my own, even if it's a mistake. I will always love you. Every word was a dagger. The second was to Elias. My dearest Elias, I began. I cannot come. My family needs me. My duty is here. To run away would be to build our future on the foundation of their ruin, and I cannot do it. Please, don't hate me. Find your happiness. Build your glass towers. And sometimes, when you see a bluebell, think of me. The tears fell so freely they smudged the ink, making the words swim before my eyes. I folded them both and placed them on the desk, side by side, to futures, to destinies, one to be lived, one to be left behind. I went to my small wardrobe and pulled out a canvas bag. What do you pack when you're running away from your life? I took a spare dress, a thick woolen cardigan my mother had knitted, and my copy of Jane Eyre. I took the locket from its hiding place and clutched it in my hand. Then, I looked around the room, the faded wallpaper, the lumpy bed, the view of the dying fields from the window. This was my life. This was all I had ever known. I sat on the edge of the bed for what must have been hours, just watching the sky begin to change, the deep, inky black softening to a bruised gray. The first bird began to sing, a tentative, hopeful chirp that felt like a mockery. The house was still. I knew my father rose at dawn, but I had a small window. It was time. I walked back to the desk. My heart hammered against my ribs. I could only take one letter, one goodbye. I reached out, my fingers hovering over the paper. The letter to my parents felt heavy with betrayal. The letter to Elias felt heavy with regret. It was the choice between breaking their hearts or breaking my own. The first rays of dawn, pale and yellow, finally pierced the gloom. I could hear the distant, mournful whistle of the 6:30 a.m. freight train, a reminder that my own train was not far behind. My hand, shaking as if it had a will of its own, finally made its choice. I picked up my bag, tucked one of the folded letters deep into my pocket, and crept towards the window. The world was shrouded in a damp, clinging mist as I slipped out of the house. It muffled the sounds of the waking world, making my own footsteps on the gravel path sound unnervingly loud. The air was cold and smelled of wet earth and woods from a distant chimney. It was the smell of home. A lump formed in my throat. The walk to the station was 5 miles. 5 miles of familiar country lanes that suddenly felt alien and menacing. Every rustle in the hedgerow made me jump. I imagined my father discovering my empty bed, his roar of anger chasing me down the road. I walked faster, my canvas bag bumping against my leg, the locket clutched so tightly in my fist that its edges dug into my palm. By the time I reached the outskirts of the town, the mist was beginning to burn off, replaced by the low, gray light of a sunless morning. The train station was a small, soot-stained brick building. It always seemed a sad place to me, a place of goodbyes. The air hung thick with the smell of coal, steam, and something else, a kind of restless energy. I bought my ticket with trembling hands, $17. The ticket cost nearly $4. I was left with just over $13, and a future that was a complete and terrifying blank. I stepped onto the platform, and there he was. Elias was standing at the far end, near the old water tower, just as he'd said he would be. He was pacing back and forth, his hands shoved deep into his pockets. He wore a patched-up jacket that was too thin for the morning chill. He looked young, anxious, and impossibly dear to me. My heart ached. He hadn't seen me yet. I stayed in the shadows of the station overhang, watching him. This was it, the final moment. All I had to do was walk down that platform, take his hand, and step onto the train. A single act of courage. My mind, once again, became a whirlwind. I saw us in the city, poor but happy. Elias, sketching his buildings at a tiny table, while I wrote my stories. I saw his smile every morning. But then the vision soured. I saw the worry in his eyes when the money ran out. I saw the resentment creep in when our dreams were worn down by the harsh reality of survival. Would our love be enough? Would it withstand poverty, failure, And then I thought of the other path. I saw Arthur's steady, kind face. I saw a warm home, the smell of baking bread. I saw children playing in a field of healthy corn, my parents old and content by the fire. A life of quiet duty, of building something solid and lasting. A life without the soaring highs of a grand passion, but also without the terrifying lows of its potential failure. The distant rumble grew louder. A whistle shrieked, sharp and final. The 7 a.m. train to the city was arriving. It thundered into the station, a great black beast of steam and steel, its brakes squealing in protest. Doors were flung open. People began to hurry on and off. Through the steam, I saw Elias stop pacing. He scanned the platform, his face a mask of raw hope. Then, his eyes found mine, and he smiled. Oh dear, that smile. It wasn't just a happy smile. It was a smile of relief, of pure, unadulterated love and trust. It said, "You came. I knew you would. Our life starts now." It was the most beautiful and the most devastating thing I had ever seen. It broke my heart because in that single, shattering moment, I knew I couldn't do it. I couldn't take that beautiful trust and drag it through the mud of uncertainty. I couldn't build my happiness on the wreckage of my family. The station master shouted, "All aboard." Elias took a step towards me, his hand outstretched. I looked at his hand, then at his face, and then I looked away, towards the road that led back home. I thought of my mother. I thought of the letter in my pocket, with everything inside me, screaming in protest. I did the hardest thing I have ever done. I didn't get on the train. I didn't even walk toward him. I just gave a small, almost imperceptible shake of my head. I saw the hope in his eyes curdle into confusion, and then into a dawning, terrible understanding. I didn't wait to see the rest. I turned my back on him, on the train, on the entire life he was offering. I wrapped my arms around myself and walked, numb and hollow, right off the platform and back towards the life that had been chosen for me. I didn't look back, but I heard the train doors slam shut, and I heard the long, mournful whistle as it pulled away, taking Elias, and a part of me, with it. The walk home was a walk through a world that had lost its color. The sun might as well have not risen. I was a hollowed-out shell, moving purely on instinct. When I got back to the farm, the house was quiet. I slipped back in through my window, my heart a dead weight in my chest. In my room, I found the letter I had written to my parents still sitting on the desk. I picked it up, tore it into tiny, unreadable pieces, and let them fall like snow into the wastebasket. The letter to Elias, the one I had taken with me, remained in my pocket, a secret testament to the morning's events. My mother found me a few hours later, sitting on my bed, staring at nothing. She didn't ask where I'd been. She just saw the state of me, my tear-stained face and muddy shoes. She sat beside me, took my hand, and said nothing at all. Her silence was a gift. It was an acceptance. She knew I was grieving something, even if she didn't know what it was. Life, you see, moves on, whether you want it to or not. A week later, Arthur Henderson came to call again. This time, I didn't hide in my room. I sat with him in the parlor, and when my father formally proposed the match, I said yes. My voice was a monotone, a whisper, but it was enough. My life with Arthur was not a grand romance. It was not a story for the poetry books, but oh dear, it was a good life. It was a life built on shared ground, literally and figuratively. Arthur was a man of profound kindness and quiet strength. He never pushed me to talk about the sadness he sometimes saw in my eyes. He simply worked alongside me, building a life, a family, and a home. Our love wasn't a spark. It was a slow-burning ember that kept us warm for 47 years. We saved the farm, we combined our lands and our efforts, and we prospered. We had 2 children, a boy and a girl, and their laughter filled the old house in a way I never thought possible. I packed the silver locket away in the biscuit tin, a relic of a girl I no longer was. I learned to be content. I learned to be happy. Even the sharp ache of regret for Elias slowly faded into a dull, distant memory, like a song you can't quite place. My parents lived to see their grandchildren grow. They saw the farm thrive, their legacy secure. My mother passed peacefully in her sleep one spring morning. My father, without her, seemed to shrink. The hardness that had defined him for so long began to soften, eroded by age and grief. He grew frail, his once powerful hands becoming thin and papery. A few years later, He fell ill. I spent my days by his bedside, caring for him, as he had, in his own way, always cared for us. He was mostly quiet, lost in memories. But one afternoon, the rain was tapping against the windowpane, and he seemed to wake from a long dream. His eyes, cloudy with age, found mine and held them. There was an urgency in them I hadn't seen in years. He beckoned me closer with a trembling finger. His voice was a dry, rattling whisper, a shadow of the booming voice I remembered. "Eleanor," he rasped, struggling for each word. "There's something I must tell you." I leaned in, putting my ear close to his lips. I thought he was going to talk about the farm, or my mother. I was wrong. "The Vincents," he whispered, and a jolt went through me. I hadn't heard that name in our house for decades. It, WASN, single quotes T, ... It wasn't what I told you. He coughed, a racking, painful sound. I gave him a sip of water. He gathered his strength, his eyes pleading with me to understand, to listen. About the land, ... about Elias's father, ... about the betrayal. He took a ragged breath, and the next words he spoke would unravel the entire tapestry of my life, revealing a truth hidden for over 60 years. I held my breath, the scent of old linens and lavender in the room suddenly sharp and overwhelming. The only sound was the rain and my father's labored breathing. "It was my father," he whispered, the words catching in his throat. "Your grandfather. It was him who cheated the Vincents." The world seemed to tilt on its axis. I just stared at him, unable to process his words. All my life, I had believed in a simple truth. The Vincents were the villains, and we were the wronged. It was the bedrock of my father's character, the reason for his hardness, the justification for his choices. "Your grandfather," he continued, his voice thin but determined. "He moved the boundary stones one winter, after a heavy snow. Old man Vincent was a trusting fool. He never checked. My father stole 20 acres of their best pasture land. Clean stole it." He closed his eyes, a single tear escaping and tracing a path through the deep wrinkles on his cheek. "I found out. When I was a boy, I found the old maps. When I confronted him, he told me to hold my tongue, that a man does what he must for his family to survive. He made me complicit in his shame." Everything clicked into place. The decades of bitterness, the cold shoulder at the market, his violent reaction to my love for Elias. It wasn't pride. It was shame. It was a deep, festering guilt that he had carried his entire life, a burden passed down from his own father. He hated the Vincents because they were a living, breathing reminder of his family's sin. "When I saw you with that boy," he rasped, "I was terrified. I thought, if you two married, the truth would come out. The old wound would be opened. We'd be shamed. And we were struggling, ... the drought, ... I thought marrying you to Arthur, joining with the Hendersons, would make us secure. It would bury the past for good." He looked at me, his eyes swimming with a lifetime of regret. "I was wrong, Eleanor. I was a coward. I let my father's shame dictate my life, ... and yours. I broke your heart to protect a lie." In that moment, all the resentment I had ever felt towards him, all the anger for the choice he had forced upon me, it all just ... dissolved. I saw him not as the stern, unyielding patriarch, but as a flawed, frightened man, trapped by a legacy he didn't create but felt honor-bound to uphold. I put my hand on his. "It's all right, Papa," I whispered, and the forgiveness in my voice was as real as the rain outside. "It's all right." He squeezed my hand, a flicker of peace crossing his face, and a few days later, he was gone. Life went on. Arthur and I grew old together. He passed away peacefully on a sunny autumn afternoon, leaving me with a lifetime of quiet, steady memories, and a wonderful family. It was only about 5 years ago, long after I was widowed, that the circle finally closed. I was in the village post office, and I saw a man, stooped with age, with kind, faded blue eyes. I knew him instantly. It was Elias. We stood there for a moment in awkward silence, two ghosts from another lifetime. He suggested we get a cup of tea. We sat in the little village cafe, the same one where we'd once shared a lemonade as teenagers. He told me about his life. He had become an architect, not of glass towers, but of sturdy, sensible homes. He had married, had 3 children, and now had grandchildren of his own. He'd had a good life. "I saw you that day, at the station," he said, looking into his teacup. "I saw you turn away. I was angry for a long time," he admitted. "But then, I grew up. I understood. You did what you had to do for your family. It was the right choice, Eleanor." The brave choice. Did you know, I asked quietly, about our grandfathers? He gave a small, sad smile. My father told me the story when I was a boy. He told me not to hold a grudge. He said bitterness was a poison you drink yourself. Before we parted ways, he said, the bluebells, you know. They still grow by that old stone wall. Every spring, without fail, we said our goodbyes to old friends with a shared past, and walked away in opposite directions. There were no fireworks, no lingering regrets, just a quiet, peaceful sense of closure. Nan looks up from the locket, back at the camera. Her eyes are misty, but she is smiling, a gentle, genuine smile. So you see, my dear, the story isn't about which path I chose at that train station. Both paths would have had their own joys and their own sorrows. The lesson, the one that took me a lifetime to learn, is in how you walk the path you're on. It's about forgiveness. Forgiving others for their flaws, for the burdens they carry, and most importantly, forgiving yourself for the person you used to be and the choices you made with the heart you had at the time. Love isn't just one thing. It isn't just the wild, passionate flame of youth. It's also the slow, steady ember of companionship. It's the fierce, protective love of a parent and the quiet, understanding love of a friend. My life with Arthur was a good life. It was a beautiful life. And this locket, she closes it with a soft click. This isn't a reminder of a life I lost. It's a reminder that my heart was, and still is, capable of holding more than one story at a time.